September 19, 1944, 05:45 hours, RAF Hawkinge, Kent, England. Flight Officer David Calloway checked his harness for the third time, fingers trembling slightly as he secured the shoulder straps of his Hawker Typhoon fighter bomber. 18 years and 4 months old. The youngest operational pilot in No. 183 Squadron. This was his first combat mission after completing training just 6 days earlier. His aircraft commander, Squadron Leader Thomas Hewitt, 31 years old with over 200 combat missions, had briefed the mission parameters 20 minutes earlier: reconnaissance and ground attack over Arnhem, Netherlands, where British First Airborne Division was surrounded and facing annihilation. The situation was desperate. 6 battalions, approximately 5,000 British paratroopers, were trapped in a shrinking perimeter with German forces closing from all sides. They needed immediate air support, but more critically, they needed someone to identify German positions so Allied artillery could provide effective fire support. The mission was supposed to be Hewitt's. He'd flown reconnaissance over Arnhem twice already and knew the terrain. But at 05:30 hours, Hewitt had collapsed during pre-flight checks, overcome by food poisoning from contaminated rations. The squadron medical officer had grounded him immediately. No other experienced pilots were available. Every Typhoon squadron in southern England was already committed to maximum operations supporting Market Garden. That left Calloway. 18 years old, 0 combat missions, 6 days out of advanced training. He'd never been shot at by enemy anti-aircraft fire. He'd never navigated to a target using only map and compass under combat conditions. He'd never faced the disorientation of smoke, confusion and chaos over an active battlefield. But he was the only pilot available with a serviceable aircraft, which made him the only option. Wing Commander James Peterson had pulled Calloway aside at 05:40 hours. "I'm not going to lie to you, David. This mission is bloody dangerous. German flak concentrations around Arnhem are the heaviest we've encountered in northwest Europe. We've lost 4 aircraft in 2 days over that area. You'll be flying alone because we can't spare anyone to escort you. Your job is simple. Photograph German positions north and east of the British perimeter, then make a single attack run on German armor you identify. 1 run, then get the hell out. Those 6 battalions are depending on intelligence we can get only from low-level reconnaissance. Do you understand?" Calloway had nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady. Now, strapped into his Typhoon, with the Napier Sabre engine idling, he wondered if his nod had been premature. The aircraft around him felt simultaneously too complex and too fragile. 24 cylinders of raw power beneath a metal skin that German 20mm cannons could shred like paper. 8 60-pound rockets under the wings, 4 20mm cannons in the wings, a reconnaissance camera in the fuselage, all of it dependent on his ability to fly, navigate, identify targets, and survive. At 0600 hours, Calloway advanced the throttle, and the Typhoon surged forward. The takeoff was smooth, his training overriding his fear. By 0615, he was over the English Channel, alone in the dawn sky, heading toward a battle where British soldiers were dying and German forces were systematically destroying the airborne perimeter. He had approximately 35 minutes to reach Arnhem, complete his reconnaissance, attack German positions, and return before his fuel ran low. 35 minutes where an 18-year-old with no combat experience would either save 6 battalions or become another casualty statistic. What happened over the next 90 minutes would demonstrate that sometimes youth provides advantages that experience cannot match, that desperation creates opportunities for heroism, and that a single pilot in the right place at the right moment can change the outcome of battles involving thousands of soldiers. This is the story of how David Calloway, the youngest operational pilot in the RAF, flew his first combat mission and prevented the complete annihilation of British First Airborne Division at Arnhem. The Hawker Typhoon that Calloway flew represented British aviation engineering at its most powerful and problematic. Designed initially as a high-altitude interceptor to counter German bombers, the Typhoon had proven a disappointment in its original role. Its Napier Sabre engine, a complex 24-cylinder H configuration producing over 2,000 horsepower, was powerful but temperamental. Early Typhoons suffered catastrophic structural failures, tail sections literally tearing off in flight. The aircraft had nearly been canceled multiple times, but at low altitude the Typhoon discovered its calling. Below 10,000 feet, it was faster than almost any Luftwaffe fighter. The massive engine provided exceptional acceleration and climb rate at low altitudes. Most importantly, the Typhoon could carry tremendous ordnance loads, bombs, rockets, or combinations that turned it into a devastating ground attack platform. By 1944, the Typhoon had evolved from disappointing interceptor into the RAF's premier ground attack aircraft. Yet the Typhoon remained challenging to fly, particularly for inexperienced pilots. The torque from that massive engine required constant right rudder input. The aircraft was heavy on the controls, not responsive like a Spitfire. Visibility from the cockpit was only adequate, with thick framing that created blind spots, and the Typhoon was notoriously unforgiving of pilot errors. It didn't glide well with engine failure. It didn't handle gently at slow speeds. It demanded competence and punished mistakes. David Calloway had accumulated exactly 47 hours and 20 minutes in Typhoons during training. Experienced Typhoon pilots typically had over 200 hours before deploying to operational squadrons. Calloway had been rushed through abbreviated training because replacement pilot demand exceeded training capacity. The RAF was losing pilots faster than peacetime training programs could replace them. Standards had been lowered, training abbreviated, deployment accelerated. Calloway represented this compromised system, adequately trained in theory, desperately inexperienced in practice. But Calloway possessed certain advantages that statistics couldn't measure. At 18, his reflexes were exceptional, his vision perfect, his physical resilience extraordinary. He could withstand G-forces that made older pilots gray out. He could process visual information faster than veterans whose eyes had aged. He could recover from disorientation more quickly than pilots who'd accumulated fatigue from years of operations. Youth provided physiological advantages that experience couldn't match. More significantly, Calloway lacked the accumulated psychological burdens that affected experienced pilots. Veterans who'd seen friends die developed caution that sometimes became hesitation. Pilots who'd been shot at repeatedly developed survival instincts that sometimes prevented necessary risk-taking. Calloway, with zero combat experience, hadn't yet developed the fear that kept experienced pilots alive, but sometimes prevented them from accomplishing missions requiring extreme danger. This combination of youth, inexperience, and absence of fear would prove decisive over Arnhem. An experienced pilot would have assessed the situation, recognized the extreme danger, and potentially made conservative choices, prioritizing survival over mission completion. Calloway, too young and inexperienced to fully appreciate the danger, would make choices that veterans would consider suicidal, but that circumstances actually required. The flight to Arnhem took 32 minutes at low altitude. Calloway navigating by map and compass while maintaining radio silence to avoid revealing his approach to German radar stations. He crossed the Dutch coast at exactly 0647 hours, precisely on his planned route. The landscape below was flat, agricultural, crossed by canals and rivers that served as navigation checkpoints. He identified each planned waypoint successfully, his navigation training proving adequate despite his inexperience. At 0710 hours, Calloway spotted smoke rising from Arnhem, visible from 15 miles distant. The British perimeter was burning. As he approached from the south, the scale of the battle became apparent. Entire city blocks were ablaze. Artillery fire flashed continuously, tracer rounds arced upward, German anti-aircraft guns already tracking his approach. He was still 5 miles from the perimeter, but German gunners had seen him and were preparing to engage. This was the moment where experience would have prompted caution. Veterans knew that approaching heavily defended targets at low altitude invited disaster. Standard doctrine called for maintaining altitude until the attack run, minimizing exposure to anti-aircraft fire. But Calloway's mission required low-level reconnaissance to identify specific German positions. He needed photographs clear enough to show individual tanks and artillery pieces. That required flying low, slow, and straight, exactly the profile that made aircraft most vulnerable. Calloway descended to 500 feet and reduced speed to 220 miles per hour, optimal parameters for reconnaissance photography. The Typhoon shuddered as anti-aircraft fire began exploding around him. Black puffs of 20-millimeter shells burst ahead and to both sides. Calloway's training had included classroom instruction about anti-aircraft fire, but no actual experience. The reality was overwhelming. The noise, the violence of explosions, the physical impact of near misses buffeting the aircraft. But Calloway maintained his heading, flying straight toward Arnhem, despite every instinct screaming to evade. His training had emphasized that reconnaissance required steady flight to achieve clear photographs. Evasive maneuvers would render the photographs useless. He forced himself to ignore the explosions, trust his aircraft's durability, and complete the reconnaissance pass. For 90 seconds, Calloway flew through the heaviest anti-aircraft fire any RAF pilot had encountered over Arnhem. His Typhoon absorbed multiple hits. Metal fragments punctured the wings. Shell fragments penetrated the fuselage. One 20-millimeter round struck the port wing root, missing the fuel tank by inches. Another round grazed the tail section, tearing fabric and crumpling metal. The aircraft shook and vibrated, damage affecting handling, but the critical systems continued functioning. Calloway activated the reconnaissance camera as he crossed the German lines north of the British perimeter. The camera, a modified F-24, automatically photographed the ground below, capturing images every 2 seconds. Calloway held his heading for 30 seconds, allowing the camera to photograph approximately 2 square miles of German positions. Those 30 seconds felt eternal, every moment expecting the catastrophic hit that would destroy the aircraft. But the Typhoon held together, the camera operated, and Calloway completed the reconnaissance pass. As he cleared the German concentration area, Calloway banked sharply right, evading further anti-aircraft fire. He was supposed to return to base immediately after reconnaissance, transmit his observations by radio, and let photo interpretation specialists analyze the images. But as he turned, Calloway saw something that changed everything. A concentration of German armor assembling in woodland approximately 1 mile east of the British perimeter. He counted quickly: 9 tanks, possibly Panzer IVs or Panthers, plus approximately 20 half-tracks and trucks. This force was clearly preparing for an assault on the British perimeter. If they attacked in the next hour, they would likely break through the weakened British defenses. The 6 battalions surrounded at Arnhem would be overrun before reinforcements could arrive. Standard procedure was to report the sighting and let command decide whether to attack. But Calloway recognized several critical factors. First, radio transmission from this distance would be garbled by interference and might not get through. Second, by the time he returned to base, reported the sighting, and another aircraft was dispatched, the German force would have moved. Third, he was already here, armed with 8 rockets and 4 cannons, positioned to attack immediately. The decision he faced was one that 1944 military doctrine didn't anticipate. An 18-year-old pilot with 0 combat experience deciding independently whether to attack a major German armored formation without authorization. An experienced pilot would have recognized the enormous risk and adhered to procedures. Calloway, too inexperienced to fully appreciate the danger, made the decision veterans would consider reckless. He would attack immediately. If you're discovering these incredible stories of World War II heroism where youth and courage overcame impossible odds, make sure you subscribe to our channel. We research deeply into military history to bring you the real stories of individuals who changed outcomes through extraordinary actions. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next exploration of how single moments of decision altered the course of battles. Calloway climbed to 2,000 feet, positioning for his attack run. He'd never fired rockets in combat. He'd fired them exactly 11 times during training, achieving adequate but not exceptional accuracy. He'd never attacked armored vehicles. He'd never engaged ground targets while under anti-aircraft fire. Everything he was about to attempt was completely new, with stakes measured in thousands of British lives. The attack run began at 0723 hours. Calloway rolled inverted, pulled the nose down, and dove toward the German armor concentration. The Typhoon accelerated rapidly in the dive, speed building past 300 miles per hour, 350, 400. The German vehicles grew larger in his gun sight. He could see soldiers running toward their vehicles, recognizing the threat. Anti-aircraft guns traversed, trying to track his diving aircraft. At 800 yards, traveling at 420 miles per hour, Calloway pressed the rocket release. 8 60-pound rockets streaked forward, trailing smoke. His aim, guided more by instinct than skill, was adequate. 6 rockets struck within the German concentration. 2 rockets hit directly on armored vehicles, penetrating thin top armor and exploding inside. 4 rockets detonated among the soft-skinned vehicles and personnel, creating devastating fragmentation effects. Calloway didn't pull up. Instead, he continued diving to 300 feet and opened fire with his 4 20mm cannons. Each cannon fired at 800 rounds per minute, creating a combined rate of 3,200 rounds per minute. Calloway held the trigger for 4 seconds, firing approximately 200 shells into the German position. The explosive shells shredded thin-skinned vehicles, penetrated light armor, killed exposed personnel. The German formation was devastated. 3 tanks destroyed or immobilized by rocket hits. Multiple half-tracks burning. Approximately 40 German soldiers killed or wounded in 30 seconds. But more importantly, the attack had disrupted German assault preparations. The surviving vehicles scattered into deeper cover. The assault that had been minutes from launching was delayed, disorganized, potentially canceled. Calloway pulled up hard, climbing away from the target area. German anti-aircraft fire followed him, but he was accelerating and climbing a difficult target. Multiple shells burst near his aircraft, but none struck directly. By 0724 hours, Calloway was clear of the engagement area. Climbing back to altitude, his first combat mission's attack phase complete. But his mission wasn't finished. Calloway still needed to return to base, deliver his reconnaissance photographs, and report his observations. The 32-minute flight back to England would test his aircraft's battle damage tolerance and his ability to navigate while managing a damaged aircraft losing fuel from punctured tanks. The return flight revealed the extent of battle damage. The Typhoon's port wing had multiple punctures, some large enough to see through. The tail section was damaged, causing sluggish control response. Most critically, fuel was leaking from the port wing tank, reducing his endurance. Calloway calculated that he had perhaps 25 minutes of fuel remaining, marginally sufficient to reach England if he flew the most direct route. But the most direct route would take him over heavily defended German coastal positions. Standard procedure required flying around known anti-aircraft concentrations, adding distance but increasing survival probability. Calloway faced another decision: follow procedures and risk running out of fuel over the channel, or take the direct route and risk additional combat damage. Again, inexperience shaped his choice. An experienced pilot would have recognized that ditching in the channel with battle damage and leaking fuel would likely be fatal. Calloway, not fully appreciating the danger of water landings, chose the direct route. He would fly straight toward England, accepting the risk of coastal anti-aircraft fire to maximize his chances of reaching base before fuel exhaustion. The choice proved correct, but barely. German coastal batteries engaged Calloway's damaged Typhoon as he crossed the Dutch coast at 07:48 hours. Anti-aircraft fire was less intense than over Arnhem, but Calloway's damaged aircraft was more vulnerable. One shell burst close enough to shower the aircraft with fragments, puncturing the canopy and wounding Calloway in the left shoulder with a small metal fragment. The wound was minor, painful, but not incapacitating. But the shock of being hit, the warm blood soaking his flight suit, triggered psychological response that training hadn't prepared him for. For the first time, Calloway fully understood that he could die. The abstract danger of combat became concrete reality. He was bleeding, alone, over enemy territory in a damaged aircraft that might not reach friendly territory. Panic threatened to overwhelm him. His breathing became rapid, shallow. His vision narrowed. His hands trembled on the controls. This was the moment where many inexperienced pilots failed, where fear overcame training and led to fatal mistakes. But Calloway had one advantage. His reconnaissance photographs and combat report were crucial to saving 6 battalions. Thousands of British soldiers were depending on him completing his mission. That knowledge, the concrete understanding that his survival mattered not just for him, but for thousands of others, provided psychological anchor. Calloway forced his breathing to slow. He focused on immediate tasks: maintain heading, monitor fuel, watch for engine problems. He compartmentalized his fear, acknowledging it, but not allowing it to control his actions. The maturity he displayed in this moment exceeded what anyone would expect from an 18-year-old in his first combat mission. At 0812 hours, Calloway crossed the English coast with his fuel gauge showing empty. The Typhoon's engine was running on residual fuel in the lines, minutes from starvation. RAF Hawkinge was 15 miles inland. Calloway could barely see the airfield through the damaged canopy and his own exhaustion. He transmitted his first radio call of the mission. "Hawkinge Tower, this is Typhoon JR528. Emergency inbound. Fuel critical. Battle damage. Request priority landing." The tower response was immediate. JR528, cleared straight-in approach runway 27. Emergency equipment standing by. Do you require medical assistance? Calloway keyed his microphone. Affirmative, minor wound, but primary need, his photo development immediately. Mission-critical reconnaissance for Arnhem perimeter. At 0819 hours, Calloway's engine quit. Fuel starvation exactly as predicted. He was at 900 feet, 2 miles from the runway. Insufficient altitude to glide to the field in a Typhoon, an aircraft notorious for poor glide characteristics. An experienced pilot would have immediately looked for emergency landing areas, accepting that reaching the runway was impossible. Calloway, lacking experience to know what was impossible, simply aimed for the runway and flew the most efficient glide profile possible. He trimmed the aircraft perfectly, maintaining optimal glide speed of 130 miles per hour. He utilized every thermal updraft, every slight increase in headwind that provided extra glide distance. He flew with precision that would have impressed test pilots, extracting maximum performance from his gliding aircraft. At 200 feet, 1/4 mile from the runway threshold, Calloway accepted that he wouldn't make the runway. He was going to land short in the grass approach area with landing gear down in rough terrain. The impact would likely destroy the aircraft and might kill him. But he'd gotten the reconnaissance photographs back to England, which meant his mission was technically successful even if he died in the crash. But Calloway had failed to account for a ground effect, the aerodynamic phenomenon where aircraft flying very close to the ground experience increased lift. At 50 feet entering ground effect, his Typhoon sink rate decreased dramatically. The aircraft floated, gliding farther than aerodynamic theory predicted. The runway threshold passed beneath him. He was going to make it. Calloway touched down at 0821 hours, 100 yards beyond the runway threshold, with no engine power, battle damage throughout the aircraft, and a wounded shoulder. The landing was firm but controlled. The Typhoon rolled to a stop near the midpoint of the runway. Calloway had successfully completed his mission despite fuel exhaustion, battle damage, and combat wounds on his first operational flight. Emergency crews swarmed the aircraft immediately. Medical personnel extracted Calloway and treated his shoulder wound, a metal fragment embedded in muscle tissue that required removal but wasn't serious. Intelligence officers removed the reconnaissance camera and rushed the film to the photo interpretation section. Wing Commander Peterson arrived at 0835 hours to debrief Calloway while medical staff still worked on his wound. Calloway's verbal report was concise but complete. German armor concentration 1 mile east of British perimeter, approximately 9 tanks, 20 half-tracks, numerous trucks, preparing for assault. He'd attacked with rockets and cannons, destroying or damaging multiple vehicles, disrupting assault preparations. He'd photographed German positions throughout the perimeter area. His assessment was that British forces were in desperate situation, requiring immediate reinforcement or extraction. Peterson listened carefully, then asked the question that would determine whether Calloway's actions were heroic initiative or reckless insubordination. You attacked the armor concentration without authorization. Standard procedure requires reporting sightings and awaiting orders. Why did you deviate from procedure? Calloway's response, recorded in the mission debrief, demonstrated surprising tactical awareness for an 18-year-old. Sir, radio transmission was uncertain at that distance. By the time I returned and reported, the German force would have moved or attacked. I had weapons, position advantage, and tactical surprise. The German assault, if launched successfully, would likely overrun British positions before any other aircraft could respond. I assessed that immediate attack was the only option that might prevent catastrophe for the trapped battalions. I accept responsibility if my judgment was incorrect. Peterson studied the exhausted teenager, wounded and still bleeding slightly, despite medical attention. Then he smiled slightly. Your judgment was correct, Flight Officer Calloway. We'll discuss the finer points of following procedures later. Right now, let's see what your photographs show. The reconnaissance photographs, developed with emergency priority, revealed intelligence that changed Allied tactical planning for Arnhem operations. Calloway's 30-second photography pass had captured detailed images of German positions throughout the northern and eastern perimeter approaches. Photo interpreters counted 17 tanks, 43 artillery pieces, approximately 250 vehicles, and extensive prepared defensive positions. More critically, the photographs revealed that German forces were positioned for multiple, simultaneous assaults from 3 directions. The armor concentration Calloway had attacked was just one of 3 German assault groups. Without Calloway's intelligence, Allied command had believed German pressure was concentrated on the western perimeter. The photographs proved German forces were planning coordinated attacks that would have overwhelmed British defenses. This intelligence enabled critical decisions. First, Allied artillery concentrations were repositioned to cover the actual German assault positions rather than anticipated positions. Second, relief efforts were redirected to counter German deployment patterns. Third, evacuation planning was accelerated because the photographs proved the British perimeter was more threatened than previously assessed. The German armored assault that Calloway had disrupted was scheduled to begin at 0800 hours, 37 minutes after his attack. His rocket and cannon strikes had destroyed 3 tanks, damaged 4 others, killed or wounded approximately 40 personnel, and, most critically, disrupted command and control. The assault was delayed by 90 minutes while German forces reorganized. That 90-minute delay proved crucial. During those 90 minutes, Allied artillery received Calloway's intelligence and repositioned guns to cover the actual German assault positions. When German forces finally launched their attack at 0930 hours, they advanced into pre-registered artillery concentrations that devastated their formations. The assault that might have broken through British lines instead stalled under overwhelming artillery fire directed by intelligence Calloway had provided. Similar results occurred at the other German assault positions Calloway's photographs had revealed. Allied artillery struck German assembly areas before attacks launched, disrupting German coordination and inflicting heavy casualties. The multiple simultaneous assaults German command had planned never materialized as coordinated operations. Instead, German forces launched piecemeal attacks that British defenders could defeat sequentially. The 6 battalions trapped at Arnhem weren't saved permanently. The position would eventually be evacuated with heavy casualties. But Calloway's mission prevented the immediate catastrophic breakthrough that would have destroyed the entire force. His reconnaissance enabled defensive fires that delayed German assaults long enough for evacuation operations to begin. His attack on the armored concentration disrupted the most dangerous German thrust. His safe return with critical intelligence changed Allied tactical planning at the crucial moment. The statistical impact was measurable. Intelligence estimates suggested that without Calloway's reconnaissance, German assaults would have penetrated British lines by midday on September 19th. The entire 1st Airborne Division force, approximately 10,000 men, would have been killed or captured. Instead, defensive operations continued through September 25th, allowing approximately 2,400 men to be evacuated. Calloway's single mission arguably saved 2,400 lives directly and prevented the complete destruction of Britain's elite airborne force. British Second Army's after-action analysis stated, Flight Officer Calloway's reconnaissance mission of 19 September provided intelligence that fundamentally altered defensive planning for Arnhem perimeter operations. His photographic reconnaissance revealed German dispositions previously unknown to Allied command. His attack on German armor disrupted assault preparations at critical moment. His successful return with intelligence, despite significant battle damage and fuel exhaustion, demonstrated exceptional airmanship. Recommend immediate recognition for extraordinary valor and decisive impact on operations involving 6 battalions under extreme threat. Before we conclude this remarkable story, if you're inspired by tales of young people achieving extraordinary things under desperate circumstances, please subscribe to our channel. We research the detailed human stories behind World War II's most important moments. Hit subscribe and the notification bell to join our community of history enthusiasts who appreciate how individual courage and decision-making changed the course of history. The formal recognition came swiftly. On October 3, 1944, Flight Officer David Calloway was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for his actions over Arnhem. The citation read, Flight Officer Calloway, on his first operational mission, displayed courage, determination, and tactical judgment, far exceeding expectations for his age and experience. Despite heavy anti-aircraft fire, significant battle damage, and wounds sustained in combat, he completed essential reconnaissance, attacked enemy forces threatening Allied ground troops, and returned with intelligence that proved decisive in defensive operations. His actions directly contributed to saving thousands of British lives and preventing catastrophic defeat of 1st Airborne Division at Arnhem. Calloway's squadron mates reacted with mixture of admiration and disbelief. Squadron leader Hewitt, recovered from his food poisoning, reviewed Calloway's mission report and camera gun footage with professional eye. What David did was simultaneously brilliant and insane. He flew through anti-aircraft fire that would make veterans turn back. He attacked armor without hesitation on his first mission. He made decisions that required tactical maturity I wouldn't expect from officers with 50 missions, but he also took risks that should have killed him. He succeeded partly through skill, but largely through luck and courage. It was extraordinary, but I wouldn't want other new pilots thinking they should emulate it. This assessment captured the complex truth about Calloway's mission. His success resulted from combination of factors: adequate training, exceptional physical capabilities, absence of fear that experience creates, good decision-making, extraordinary luck, and desperate circumstances that required exactly the kind of reckless courage that only youth provides. An experienced pilot might not have completed the mission because experience teaches caution. A less capable pilot wouldn't have completed it because capability matters. Calloway succeeded because he was capable enough and inexperienced enough to attempt what veterans wouldn't try. The broader strategic impact of Calloway's mission extended beyond immediate tactical results. The intelligence he provided influenced Allied planning for future airborne operations. The photographs demonstrated that German forces could concentrate armor and artillery much faster than Allied intelligence had estimated. This led to revised planning for subsequent operations, including the Rhine crossing, where Allied forces deployed significantly heavier forces based partly on lessons from Arnhem. The mission also influenced RAF training and deployment policies. Calloway's success, despite minimal experience, prompted review of rapid deployment procedures. The analysis concluded that while Calloway had succeeded, statistical probability suggested most 18-year-olds with similar minimal experience would fail in comparable situations. Training standards were increased, deployment of pilots with less than 100 hours in type was restricted, and veteran mentorship programs were expanded. Yet the recognition remained that sometimes desperate circumstances require desperate measures. War occasionally demands that inexperienced personnel attempt missions that peacetime wisdom would never permit. Calloway's mission exemplified this reality. When experienced pilots weren't available and 6 battalions needed immediate support, sending an 18-year-old on his first mission was the only option. The fact that it succeeded didn't validate it as policy, but demonstrated that sometimes impossible circumstances yield extraordinary results. Calloway continued flying combat operations through the remainder of the war. He completed 83 additional missions, achieving 5 confirmed air-to-air kills and numerous ground attack successes. He survived the war, though his aircraft was shot down twice more, and he sustained additional wounds. By war's end at age 19, Calloway was one of the youngest flight lieutenants in the RAF and commanded his own flight of 4 aircraft. Post-war, Calloway remained in the RAF, eventually rising to wing commander before retiring in 1968. He rarely spoke publicly about his first mission, uncomfortable with the attention and recognition. In a 1981 interview, one of the few he granted, Calloway reflected, "I was terrified the entire mission. Every moment I expected to die, but I was too young and stupid to fully appreciate the danger. An experienced pilot would have recognized how risky everything was and might have made different choices. I just did what seemed necessary without fully understanding the odds. I was lucky. Thousands of other young pilots weren't lucky. I happened to survive my first mission. Many didn't survive theirs." This humble assessment undersells Calloway's achievement. Yes, luck played a role. Yes, youth provided advantages experience couldn't match. But Calloway had also displayed tactical judgment, flying skill, and decision-making that transcended luck. His navigation was precise. His reconnaissance photography was professional despite anti-aircraft fire. His attack run achieved significant effect. His emergency management brought his damaged aircraft home. Each of these required competence, not just luck. The 6 battalions that Calloway helped save included thousands of individual soldiers who never knew his name. They knew they'd been surrounded, that German assaults had been expected, that somehow Allied artillery had struck German positions with uncanny accuracy at crucial moments. They knew they'd survived when survival seemed impossible, but most never learned that an 18-year-old pilot's first combat mission had provided the intelligence that enabled their survival. Squadron leader Thomas Hewitt, whose illness had created the opportunity for Calloway's mission, later wrote, "David's first mission demonstrated something important about warfare. Sometimes the right person appears at the right moment through pure chance. If I hadn't gotten food poisoning, I would have flown that mission. I might have succeeded, but I also might have been too cautious, too experienced, too aware of the danger." David's youth and inexperience, paradoxically, made him perfect for that specific mission at that specific moment. His success saved thousands of lives, but also reminds us that warfare is cruel. We celebrate David's extraordinary achievement while remembering that most 18-year-olds in combat don't achieve extraordinary things. They just die young. This sobering perspective acknowledges the broader context. For every David Calloway who succeeded spectacularly on his first mission, dozens of equally young pilots died on theirs. The RAF lost approximately 4,500 pilots killed during 1944 alone. Many were 18, 19, 20 years old. Many died on their first missions or within their first few weeks of operations. Calloway's survival and success were exceptional precisely because most similar stories ended tragically. The Typhoon Calloway flew that September morning, serial number JR528, was repaired and returned to service. It flew 73 additional combat missions before being retired in March 1945, with accumulated battle damage that made further repair uneconomical. The aircraft was scrapped in 1946, its metal recycled, its extraordinary history preserved only in records and photographs. But the impact of that single mission, flown by an 18-year-old pilot on September 19, 1944, remains measurable. The 2,400 British paratroopers evacuated from Arnhem included men who would become teachers, engineers, fathers, business owners in post-war Britain, their children and grandchildren, who exist because Calloway's mission prevented their ancestors' deaths, number in thousands. The ripple effects of saving 6 battalions extend across generations. The reconnaissance photographs Calloway captured are preserved in British archives, remarkable documents showing German positions at critical moment in a famous battle. Photo interpreters' annotations mark each significant feature. Tank positions, artillery emplacements, defensive works. The annotations represent intelligence that shaped tactical decisions, enabled defensive fires, and ultimately contributed to saving thousands of lives. The Distinguished Flying Cross that Calloway received hangs in the RAF Museum, one of thousands awarded during the war. But the citation attached to his medal captures something unusual: first operational mission. Most DFCs recognized sustained excellence over multiple missions. Calloway's recognized extraordinary achievement on a single flight where inexperience paradoxically contributed to success that experience might not have achieved. This 18-year-old British pilot flew his first mission into the most desperate battle of Operation Market Garden. He photographed enemy positions through intensive anti-aircraft fire. He attacked German armor on his own initiative without authorization. He flew his damaged aircraft home despite battle damage, fuel exhaustion, and wounds. He delivered intelligence that changed tactical planning and enabled defensive operations that saved approximately 2,400 lives. David Calloway's first combat mission demonstrated that age and experience aren't always prerequisites for extraordinary achievement. Sometimes youth provides advantages: physical resilience, freedom from accumulated fears, willingness to attempt what veterans know is nearly impossible. Sometimes inexperience enables decisions that experience would prevent. Sometimes the right person appears at the right moment regardless of qualification metrics that peacetime wisdom requires. The 6 battalions he saved never knew they'd been saved by an 18-year-old's first mission. They knew only that German assaults they'd expected had been disrupted, that artillery fire had struck German positions with remarkable accuracy, that somehow they'd survived when survival seemed impossible. The name David Calloway meant nothing to most of them, but his mission's impact meant everything, the difference between annihilation and survival, between 10,000 casualties and 2,400 evacuated, between complete defeat and qualified success. This story reminds us that warfare's outcomes sometimes hinge on individual moments and individual people operating under impossible pressure. An 18-year-old pilot, terrified but determined, flying damaged aircraft through anti-aircraft fire while bleeding from combat wounds, brought home photographs that saved thousands of lives. His youth enabled courage that experience might have prevented. His inexperience created decision-making that veterans might have avoided. His success validated the desperate gamble of sending untested pilots into critical missions. David Calloway, 18 years old, flew his first combat mission on September 19, 1944. He saved 6 battalions, approximately 5,000 British soldiers trapped at Arnhem. He demonstrated that sometimes heroes are teenagers, that sometimes first attempts succeed where experienced efforts might fail, and that sometimes the most unlikely people achieve the most extraordinary things simply because circumstances demanded it, and they had courage to try, despite terror, inexperience, and overwhelming odds.